Alright, what's up guys, Nito here, and welcome back. So today I want to show off the build that I've been playing in SSF. I'm a level 90 Amazon, and I am playing Whirling Assault, which is a quarterstaff skill. And you basically spin around like this. And I'm also using Staggering Palm, which when you stun an enemy with this skill, it's just like a little, you basically dash to them. I can't really show you right now because there's no enemy here, but you dash to the enemy and then you stun them, and then it causes you to shoot out projectiles from your other attacks. So when you use Whirling Assault, after you have those projectiles, it's going to shoot projectiles like all around you basically. And then last, we're using Wind Blast, which is this skill right here, and it has like very big knockback and very big stun buildup. So you can see on here it has 150% more stun buildup, and then also causes daze, and daze is like kind of an ailment that doubles, I believe it's, yeah, double or 50% more stun buildup once they're dazed. So basically the play is to use Wind Blast to build up their stun meter, but we have Brink support on here so that you can't actually stun them with Wind Blast, so it just builds up their stun meter almost to full. Then you dash in with Staggering Palm to get the projectile attacks going, and then you start whirling. And then of course we also have the bell for single target. So I'll do a map and show you what it looks like. Let's see, where was the map I was going to run? Sure. So we'll just jump into a tier 15 here and show you what it looks like.
Everyone you trust has been replaced by illusion.
Okay, so when you see like enemies having the little glowy effect on it, that means they can be stunned, and then you can start firing off projectiles like that. You can see they're shooting in every direction basically, and then for single target we can do an Infernal Cry and then drop the bell, and that's going to charge, make all the hits from the bell basically do a ton of damage, and that's kind of the basic playstyle here. And then we die to BD because BD is for some reason in every single map, and it's super cool. Also for clear speed, I am using the Trample Toe Boots, which is going to cause like all these projectiles that shoot out to basically do extra damage around whenever you kill somebody. It's going to do extra damage around the where that enemy dies. So it just helps with clear speed a lot. It does nothing for single target. It makes you move kind of slowly, which is annoying, but overall it's definitely a pretty nice increase to clear speed. Because otherwise this build, like the clear speed's kind of like just okay without Trample Toe. It's definitely not required to use Trample Toe, but like you're not going to get like lightning trigger levels of clear speed or anything. But it does feel pretty good still. So the other thing to note about Whirling Assault is that it tends to get stuck on a lot of things, especially larger size mobs. You can kind of see like that. It kind of slowed me down when I whirled into the mob. So one thing that's like really important is knockback. I found that knockback is like extremely good on this skill. And right now we have not there's a node on the tree that gives you knockback whenever you crit with a quarterstaff, which is part of the reason that we're going Amazon, because Amazon gets a bunch of base crit for free. And, well, not for free, but, it's scaled off of accuracy, basically, right? And the cool thing is, like, because we have these projectiles that are firing out, and everything deals pretty much pure fizz damage, by the way. Because we have the projectiles firing out at the same time as Whirling Assault, we can apply Hobble with the Whirling Assault and then have the projectiles hit for more damage and crit. So what Hobble does is it's basically like Armor Break, but it's for evasion. So it's like Evasion Break, essentially. And it basically lowers the enemy evasion to 0, like, very easily. Most enemies don't have a large, like, the actual number, like, is very low. So when you see this, like, green buff, see that, like, green buff that was on, or debuff, I guess, that was on the enemy? That means they're fully hobbled, and it means they have 0 evasion, which means you always get the full benefit from the Amazon crit node, because the Amazon crit node gives you scaling crit chance based on how overcapped you are on your accuracy relative to the enemy's evasion. So if the enemy has 0 evasion, you're always going to be, like, you know, infinitely overcapped, essentially, on accuracy. So you always get the flat 12.5% base crit from that node, which is just really strong, and it's just because you can do it on this build while you have, like, essentially 2 skills going off at the same time. Like, you have one skill hobbling and the other skill, like, taking advantage of the hobble. It makes it just a nice smooth playstyle, and it just really helps a lot for your damage in general. And then we're also breaking armor when we stun things, and obviously we're stunning a lot because we're doing pure fizz melee damage, and because we have this stun buildup from the Wind Blast, which, even though it doesn't really look like a melee skill because it has huge range, it is actually a melee skill. And stun buildup, you get 50% more stun buildup from using melee, and you get another 50% more on top of that from being physical damage. So when you're doing both, you get, like, multiplying effect there. And you end up just doing really big stun amounts, even on bosses and stuff.
Boy cool cowboys and showers at Ram Ranch.
Hold on. So yeah, you get some nice stuns going off. It's pretty easy to stun those things. Even the tankier bosses. Although some bosses do seem to have quite a bit of, like, stun. I don't know if it's stun resistance or if it's just, like, they have so much HP that their stun threshold is just so high. But yeah, let me see if I can show you this boss over here real quick. And then I will talk more about what's actually going on in the build, go over the tree and the items and everything.
I've enough in my pack already.
Okay, so here's the boss. What you want to do is you start off with the Wind Blast, and that's going to break some armor. And then eventually you're going to get him into stun range. And then you Warcry, drop the bell, spin, and then just keep spinning and dropping bells, Warcry. You can even have multiple bells at a time. So yeah, that's kind of what bossing looks like. Pretty good. Not the best, because you are a melee build, so you do have to be in close range, which sometimes can be very dangerous. I find that actually bossing is easier than, like, some rare mods, just because, like, rare mods like the volatile plants and stuff are so annoying to deal with. on a melee build where you are just like always getting in range of the balls and stuff. But anyway, so let's go over the tree real quick. So from our ascendancy, we have, of course, critical strike, which was the node I was talking about. Gain additional crit chance equal to 25% of the excess chance to hit with attacks. So the way that this works, accuracy in this game, you can have up to 150% chance to hit, basically. So it's capped at 50% extra, so 25% of that 50% extra is going to be 12.5% base crit that this adds, assuming that you are accuracy capped. And again, because we're using Hobble in this build, which comes from, where is it? Blood in the Eyes. That's the support gem that applies Hobble against bleeding enemies, which you do have to have a source of bleed in this build, so I do have like a couple bleed chance nodes on the tree, just those. But yeah, that's kind of how we're getting the most use out of critical strike without really investing much into accuracy. So like on our tree, we don't really have really any accuracy investment. Like we just have dexterity, right? Like dexterity does give accuracy. You get a little bit of accuracy from this node, I think. And then, yeah, most of the rest of the tree is just damage, crit chance, crit multiplier, that kind of thing. So then we're, of course, using Predatory Instinct to get the wounds for 50% more damage while they have the open wound, or weakness, whatever it's called. And then also in for the kill, which gives us more movement speed and skill speed when there's an enemy nearby that has open weakness. That's just kind of, it's not super necessary, but like there's not really a better option for this build unless you have maybe like a super high accuracy weapon, which my weapon is this, so it's just high flat fizz with some extra lightning damage and some crit bonus on there. Again, I'm SSF, so like I definitely don't have perfect gear or anything, although that weapon is pretty happy with it. So yeah, I also tested Elemental Infusion, which gives you this skill, Infused Weapon, which when you consume charges, it procs basically a little elemental explosion when you fire melee projectile attacks with the weapon. The problem is it does not work with Staggering Palm, because apparently Staggering Palm does not count as damaging with the weapon or something like that. Actually, no. I think it's because it specifies like non-melee projectile attacks, and Staggering Palm is a melee attack. Even though the projectile portion is kind of separate from the melee attack, it's still considered a melee attack. So sadly, Elemental Infusion didn't work, which was unfortunate because I think there's some cool things you could have been like we could have done with Elemental Infusion. But yeah, so I ended up going for the open weakness stuff instead. And then lastly, we have Esmiri Brew, which gives us life flasks also recover mana, and mana flasks also recover life. So that's just some nice quality of life. You know, like both your flasks are going to be restoring both pools, so you know, it's just easier to top up. There is some interesting synergy you can do with this, with stuff like Eternal Youth, which makes life recovery from your flask apply to your energy shield instead, and then we can kind of like just use Leech to heal our life. I'm still kind of playing around with this. I'm not sure if I like it or not yet for this build. Obviously, we're like a hybrid life ES setup with evasion, so I do have like 70% evasion here. But yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about it currently. It's good in some situations, it's not good in other situations. For now, I'm not using it. But yeah, even without that, Esmiri Brew is quite good still. We do have a little bit of flask stuff on the tree just for a little bit of extra recovery, and also mainly so we can get over here to get Blur, because that's movement speed, and movement speed is king in this game. And we have to make up for the 15% move speed boots that we're using, because we're using Trample Toe here. So, obviously that's not that great. You want as much extra movement speed as possible. The rest of the tree, you know, we're coming out here, we're getting attack damage and attack speed, melee damage, projectile damage. Those are both relevant here because we are obviously doing both melee and projectiles. You know, we have ES evasion stuff here, ES evasion stuff here. And then we come up here, we get like the physical damage and crit chance and knockback distance and stun buildup. all of those are super important. Knockback distance, I think, is one of the things I underestimated most in this build. Knockback is actually insanely good, especially with Wind Dancer. So Wind Dancer says knocks back enemies, so it just has built-in knockback all the time, and it deals 50 or 100% more area of effect per stage, 50% more damage per stage, and 25% more knockback distance per stage. So if you have a high amount of knockback distance, any enemy that hits you, and like if you have a big AoE as well, so like I have a reach on here for 35% more AoE, and I have arm's length for 40% more knockback distance. So basically any enemy that hits us, it's gonna just like shoot them like really far away from us so that, you know, they're not going to be in melee range anymore, basically. So like it's really good at, you know, when enemies are kind of like up in your face too much, you know, as a melee build that happens a lot, you get swarmed and you get surrounded. It's really good at pushing them away, and also like it does a significant amount of damage on its own. And so sometimes you just have Wind Dancer like clearing the whole screen for you, even without any damage, any damage supports on there. So it's actually very strong. So yeah, and then, you know, we're coming up here, we're getting quarterstaff stuff. This is the node that gives you knockback if you get a crit with a quarterstaff, so that's why we're kind of like focusing on crit investment here. And I don't think I'm quite at 100% crit, but I'm pretty close for Whirling Assault. You cannot trust this number here. It's not correct because the extra crit from the Ascendancy does not calculate properly for the tooltip. So you kind of have to calculate it manually, but so our staff itself has 10% base crit chance. This node is giving us 12.5% base. And then this node right here is another 1%. So we're at 23.5% base crit chance. And then our multipliers to increased crit chance are applying. And I believe with all of the increased crit chance, like from here, from over here, and then we are using pinpoint critical, which gives us 60% more critical hit chance, and blindside, which gives us another 15% more chance to crit against blinded enemies. And pretty much everything is blinded because staggering palm projectiles have a 40% chance to blind from quality. So staggering palm's applying blind, and then we also have blind on our Wind Dancer, so anything that doesn't get hit by the projectiles, if they hit us first, is going to get blinded. So yeah, with all of those multipliers, we are very close to 100% crit chance on Whirling Assault specifically. Not so much on the other skills, but it's still pretty solid crit chance, like probably at least 50% on the other skills. So yeah, that's kind of what this node is basically the reason you really want crit chance. Obviously, the other reason is it deals very good damage, but you especially want that knockback because Whirling Assault, when you hit into a smaller enemy, you kind of whirl through it or whirl around it. But when you hit into a larger enemy, you just get stopped in place. And it's really frustrating because you kind of never really want to be stopped in place. You kind of want to keep moving. But if you have knockback, if you have enough knockback, you can just move enemies out of the way and you don't get stopped as much. And it just feels a lot nicer to play and a lot smoother. So yeah, I found that knockback on this skill is extremely nice. If you don't go for this crit node, you can also just use the bludgeon support, which just gives you knockback on that skill, like 100% chance to knockback. So that's really good. And then, you know, also this skill, Wind Blast, has knockback built in, and also has additional knockback distance from quality. And that's just another nice one for just keeping enemies away. Like, it just gets everything out of your face, which is really good. And also has that big stun buildup as well. So that's kind of the idea there. And then, you know, we have more daze and stun build up here, more defenses. We have a bunch of dexterity because we need a lot of dexterity to be able to run some of our skills. Like Wind Dancer has a very high dex cost of 191 at level 19. So that's kind of the reason why we need all this dex here. And what else is there? So, yeah. So down here we get the skill effect duration and attack damage stuff because the buff from Staggering Palm only has an 8-second base duration, which is pretty short. So getting extra skill effect duration makes that projectile firing buff last for longer, which is nice to have. And then, you know, we come down here, we get some AoE. Okay, so the other thing is that Whirling Assault has terrible AoE by default. But it is a strike skill, so you can actually scale strike radius, or strike range, I mean. So, like, for a while I was using this node here, which gives you +4 to melee strike range if you've dealt projectile attack hit in the past 8 seconds, which we, obviously, as long as we're using Staggering Palm, we are hitting with projectiles all the time, so that's actually really nice, that +4 melee strike range. I ended up swapping out of it for more damage, but I would really like to pick it back up at some point if I can get a few more levels, because I think strike range scaling and just AoE scaling in general is very important for this build. So, like, we have some AoE here, we have this AoE node. We could come down here and grab these AoE nodes as well, although they're not quite as efficient. There's also, like, more strike range over here, and more strike range right there as well. It's just hard to pick up all of these things because we're stretched pretty thin on this tree. But yeah, you do really want AoE for this build. It also affects your Wind Blast and your Wind Dancer as well, and that's pretty important, and your Tempest Bell. Like yeah, you just want AoE. What else? So we also have, as I mentioned, we have some bleed chance here, so just 20% from here. And that's because the Hobble Blood in the Eye is, as far as I know, this is the only way to get Hobble in your build currently. And yeah, this only can be applied against bleeding enemies, unfortunately. So we do have to take those well, we don't have to take these nodes specifically, but we have to have some sort of source of bleeding. So one option is to just, like, use jewels. So at some point, if I get some decent bleed chance jewels, I'll probably just, like, swap in jewels here for bleeding stuff. But currently my jewels are more focused on just, like, melee damage, and one for skill effect duration and rage on hit. You know, I'm SSF, so I don't really have, like, perfect jewels or anything like that. We also take these nodes for more rage on hit and less inherent loss, or slower inherent loss of rage. Because rage is really, really strong, and, you know, if it's 1% more damage per rage, and you can have up to 30 rage by default, so it's just 30% more damage. Because we hit so fast, we're just constantly stacking up rage pretty quickly, so yeah, rage is very, very good. That's why we take this, and, you know, the more rage on hit, I think there's like a half-second limit. Yeah, you can only hit, only one hit every 0.5 seconds can cause you to gain rage, so, like, if you just get more sources of gain rage on melee hit, you'll stack it up faster, as opposed to just hitting faster. And then for our weapon swap, we are coming all the way down here, and we're getting Warcry stuff. So powered attacks deal more damage, powered attacks have increased stun buildup, Warcry speed, Warcry cooldown, that kind of thing, and same with over here, more empowered attack stuff. And that's just because Infernal Cry is obviously super strong, and when you do an Infernal Cry, if you do Whirling Assault, you're going to empower the entire world. Like, it's not just the next hit, it's like all the hits, and it hits about 10 times per Whirling Assault. I think it's like 9 or 10 times. And because Whirling Assault is a strike skill, it means it builds combo when you hit enemies, which allows you to use Tempest Bell, which has a combo requirement. And then, yeah, if you use Infernal Cry and then Tempest Bell, then every time you hit the bell, so the bell deals damage, like, with the initial slam. So there's the initial impact of the bell, which deals quite a lot of damage, actually. It's pretty big. And then at each time you hit the bell afterwards, like, all of that is going to be empowered for the entire duration of the bell. So, yeah, Infernal Cry with Tempest Bell is just super strong. And, you know, just being able to pick up all this extra empowered damage, it just means that your Tempest Spell is just going to be pretty cracked out. Just whenever you drop it on a boss or whatever, it's going to do quite a lot of damage. So, and then let's go over our other supports here. So, Staggering Palm. Unfortunately, it only has one base projectile. So, if I take these out, actually, yeah, so like if we take out Scattershot and we take out Salvo, so this is our source of projectiles, right? Let's see if I can find an enemy to just proc it real quick. Okay, so that big explosion, that was Wind Dancer. Okay, so yeah, if you don't have the extra projectiles, this is what it looks like. Obviously, the coverage is terrible, right? Because it just shoots like one projectile in like 3 different directions. So you really need Scattershot. And then with just Scattershot, it looks like this. So it's still shooting out in like fixed directions, basically. But if you put on Salvo as well, you have the mod that makes projectiles fire in a random direction. So instead of shooting like 3 in one direction and then 3 in this direction and then 3 in that direction, it's just going to shoot out completely randomly, right? Which I think just helps with the clearing quite a bit. Salvo also is going to give you a few extra projectiles every couple seconds, so every 2 seconds I think you get 2 extra projectiles, up to 3 maximum seals. So yeah, those, I would say these supports are like more or less required to make Staggering Palm feel somewhat usable, for clearing, that is. And then we have Brutality on here for more fizz damage, Heft, and then Impale. And so we're impaling with the projectile from Staggering Palm, and then we're consuming the impale with Whirling Assault. So that just gives us some nice extra damage, or like Whirling Assault. And then yeah, Wind Blast. So we're doing Splinter for a little bit of armor break. We break most of our armor from the actual stun because I have the Shattering Blow node anointed, which says break 50% of armor on heavy stunning an enemy. And then over here we get some extra armor break, or some increased armor break. So that means we break, like, I think what are we at? We're at 70% increased. So 50% times 1.7, whatever that is. It's not quite 100% break, which means we still need like a little bit of extra armor break from Splinter. Eventually, hopefully, I can get a full 100% armor break from just stunning, and then maybe drop Splinter. But for now, we kind of need that on Wind Blast. And then we use Long Shot because we're constantly pushing enemies away with this, so they're always kind of like at a further range. So Long Shot's just a nice damage multiplier there. Overpower for 50% more stun buildup. And then Brink is super important because it means you're not going to overstun the enemy with Wind Blast, and it means they're going to be able to be stunned by Staggering Palm instead, which is going to activate the projectiles. So that's definitely one of the downsides of Staggering Palm, is that it needs to be stunning stuff in order to actually proc the projectiles. And it does have the like Crushing Blow stun effect built in, where you can stun early with this skill. But the problem is the base damage. So see how it says 147 to 221 added attack physical damage? This is an unarmed attack, so it does not use the base damage on your staff. So like my staff has 277 to 557 base damage, whereas Staggering Palm has less than half that, right? So it's really hard to just stun things on their own with Staggering Palm, like just using Staggering Palm. So that's why you kind of want to use Wind Blast to build up the stun first, and then with Brink, you can then jump in with Staggering Palm. The other thing that's really good on Brink for clearing is Armor Explosion. So because we break armor when stunning things, if we swap Brink for Armor Explosion, it feels really nice because like you're just constantly stunning and constantly blowing stuff up, right? Like it's actually very nice clear. But you know, the damage is not great for single target, so you still want to be doing like the Staggering Palm stuff for single target, and so sometimes I just like swap out for a Brink, just because, yeah, I don't know, I like the Staggering the Staggering Palm playstyle a little better. Although I think you could totally just do a Wind Blast build, especially I think on a Titan would be really, really good with Crushing Blows, and 50% more damage to stunned enemies. Because this skill in general just feels really good, and it's technically a melee skill, but you can move around while using it, and, you know, it's got huge range. Like, it does not feel like you're using a melee skill when you're hitting mobs that are, like, off the screen, basically. So, yeah, Wind Blast is really cool. And then Whirling Assault, we have Magnified Effect for more AoE, we have Blood in the Eyes for the Hobble, we have Pursuit, which makes us deal more melee damage if you dealt a projectile attack in the last 8 seconds, which obviously from Staggering Palm we do that. And then Blindside, because we are inflicting blind with Staggering Palm from the quality again, and also with Wind Dancer, we have the blind support on there. So we're getting the 15% more crit damage bonus and 15% more crit hit against blinded enemies. And then Pinpoint, again, gives us that even more crit hit chance. And again, the reason why we want as much crit chance as possible on Whirling Assault is so that we can knock back on crit. And then we have Tempest Bell with Overabundance so that we can build up combo while one of the bells is already down. Basically, yeah, with the limit 1 bell, it means you can't generate combo while the bell is out unless you have an extra limit. So that's why we use Overabundance. We use Close Combat just because the bell is kind of always right next to us. And then Heavy Swing because less attack speed doesn't really matter at all. And Rage Forged because, you know, we consume 10 rage, but then we get 35% more damage, and then we recover that rage very quickly. Because we have like 4 or 5 rage on hit, so like 2 hits and we're back to full rage. And then Infernal Cry, we have Premeditation for 15% more damage, Murderous Intent for Culling Strike, and then Tireless to occasionally get 2 empowered attacks. So like you can empower the bell and then also empower the Whirling Assault that spins. Also, I'm not entirely sure how this works with Staggering Palm. If you empower the Staggering Palm, it may empower all the projectiles. I haven't really figured out if that works or not. Like, it feels like it does in my testing, but I have not, like, confirmed anything. So it may or may not be working with Staggering Palm. So, like, if you do a War Cry and then you jump in with Staggering Palm to stun something, then, like, all the following projectiles, I think, will be empowered, I think. Which is pretty cool. So that's kind of another combo. Yeah, so this is definitely a very combo-heavy build. It is truly the vision, and honestly, it feels really good to play. So, like, in this case, I actually like it, but not every combo build feels this good. And then, yeah, for our reservations, we're using just a haste aura from our companion, and that's just got last gasp. Loyalty gives you 10% damage taken from the companion before you, so that's just like a nice little defensive buff. And then meat shield. So I mean, this thing dies all the time because I don't really have any companion investment, but you know, it's up, I don't know, 50% of the time because of last gasp, so that's at least decent. Overwhelming Presence just makes it easier to stun everything. Then Ghost Dance and Wind Dancer are obviously kind of in every ES evasion build currently. No reason not to use this. They're very strong. You just recover energy shield whenever you get hit based on your total evasion. And then, yeah, Wind Dancer, like I was saying, super nice. Like, I can... Let's see if I can find a pack and just, like, walk next to it and see if it just explodes. guys aren't moving very far. Yeah, see how far back you can knock back some enemies. It's definitely, there's definitely a lot of interesting tech I think you can do with Windancer. There's like a lot of supports that you can put on it that are kind of cool. One thing I was thinking about doing, probably not for this build, but like commiserate support, you can put on Windancer, and what it does is if you inflict an ailment with Windancer, it will remove that ailment from you. So if you can get Windancer inflicting multiple different types of ailments, every time you get hit, you'll just remove all those ailments from you, which is really cool. Like, I think that would be a cool defensive tech. I guess the problem is just like getting it to consistently apply ailments. But yeah, there's probably some cool tech. It may work with like poison and bleed. So like maybe you just put Envenom and Lacerate and Commiserate on Windancer, and like you're just like semi-immune to poison and bleed, which would be cool. I have not actually tested that, but it would definitely be cool if that works, because I think it's not just elemental ailments. I think it's all ailments. So. Yeah, but that's basically the setup here. Gear-wise, so again, this is our weapon. You just want as much flat fizz as possible, basically. The lightning damage is a little nice, just because you can occasionally shock stuff, and you can occasionally shock your bell, which gives it like 30% more, or like 30% lightning damage as extra lightning when you shock the bell, so that's nice to have, but definitely not required. You want a big energy shield helmet because of this node right here, which gives you evasion rating based on the max ES on your helmet, so you want to be using a pure energy shield helmet. This is the best one I've found so far. It's not that good. You can definitely get way more energy shield from a helmet. But again, SSF, you probably a hybrid ES evasion chest, or maybe a pure evasion chest, because of this node. Spectral Ward gives you maximum energy shield based on the evasion rating on the chest. So currently I'm using a Falconer's Jacket because of that 5% increased movement speed. Again, we have such a low movement speed because of Trampled Toe, which kind of sucks. But yeah, you kind of want it as much move speed as possible, even though I think there are higher defense bases than this, but I do like that extra movement speed a lot. Our amulet is just like ES, evasion, spirit, all attributes, all res, just whatever you can get. In terms of attributes is pretty important, because like I'm using all 3 types of attributes currently, because we have like Infernal Cry, which is pure strength, Overwhelming Presence is pure strength, and then we have like Windancer, which is pure dex, and then we have like dex int stuff. So like you kind of need a bit of everything, so you do probably want some all attributes on your amulet if you can get it. The extra spirit is also required if you want to be running all of these. Without that, you can only run 3. Like you would probably just drop the companion. So you would just run Overwhelming Presence, Ghost Dance, and Wind Dancer without that extra spirit. And then Ring, so I'm using Death Rush, which gives you Onslaught, and Onslaught's giving us 20% increased skill speed and 10% increased movement speed. So again, more move speed wherever we can get it. It also gives you some life leech, which is good. And then the other ring is just, life, rarity, res, more leech. Our gloves just have some nice evasion, some flat fizz, and some res. Belt, just life and res, and then the trample toe boots for the deal 30% of overkill damage to enemies. Nothing special as far as charms go, just using a silver charm because slows in this game are extremely annoying. They're like extremely oppressive for melee builds because like enemies can slow you for like 50%. So if you're already moving kind of slow because of the boots, and then you get slowed even more. The other thing is like Whirling Assault, you can't interrupt it with other skills. Or with like most other skills, I should say, but I think you can interrupt it with the bell, but like I can't interrupt it with like Wind Blast. I can't interrupt it with Staggering Palm. You can roll out of it, But, like, so if you get slowed while you're spinning, you're going to be spinning for, like, longer than you want to be, really. And sometimes that can get you killed, so you have to be a little bit careful there. So that's why we use the Silver Charm. And then my Chaos Res is currently terrible because in SSF finding Chaos Res gear is very hard, so I'm using the Amethyst Charm currently. Chaos is definitely the #1 thing I die to on this build, just because, yeah, I have no Chaos Res, basically. Yeah, so that is the build. And it's definitely one of my favorite builds that I've played so far. I think I really just enjoy the playstyle of these wind skills in general. I think they're... I can see the vision from BGG. Like, I understand why they designed it this way. I think I've heard a lot of people saying these skills are all garbage, they're all trash. Like, I understand why people say that, because I think if you don't have the proper investment into things like knockback and AoE, it does feel pretty terrible to play. But if you have those things, it actually feels pretty good. So I would recommend trying it out with, you know, certainly get this stuff and see how it feels for you. Also, I will say that leveling this build with Staggering Palm is extremely easy, because in Act 1 and 2, Staggering Palm does, like, busted damage, because the base damage from the skill scales harder than the early game weapons you can get. So, like, the flat damage is going to be, like, double what you would get from a weapon. So you can just spam Staggering Palm, and you'll probably instant stun everything too, so you can just spam it, you can get projectiles from it. So yeah, leveling with Staggering Palm, super easy. And yeah, I would just put, like, Martial Tempo and Brutality on it in Act 1, and just, like, go to town. You get it, like, it's a level 3, or tier 3 skill, so you get it super early on, at, like, level 5 or something. So, yeah. Definitely leveling this build is very easy. The only problem is that you don't actually get access to Whirling Assault until much later in the campaign, so I leveled with Wind Blast and Staggering Palm. And Frozen Locust is also another one that gets a bunch of flat base damage from the gem itself and not from the weapon. So if you can find a weapon early on that has, like, +2 to melee skill gems, or like a pair of gloves that has, like, +1 to melee skills, leveling is just super easy. So I can definitely recommend that. Yeah, that's the build. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.